Well, good evening, folks. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's 10:24 p.m. on Sunday, the 26th of May, and I felt like doing a podcast. So, let's address very quickly the interview with Kat. I heard from Karin Hustabot, who's also Belgian, and she had watched the interview. And I want to point out that if you do any background research, you will find out that the names that she gives, like Leopold the First, it's impossible that she's the child of that person. Okay? And there's one, two, or three errors that she makes in the show that if somebody were to research, they might attempt to discredit what she's saying. But, I mean, you're dealing with somebody who has been through an extraordinary ordeal, and the core truths of what she's saying are true. There's no doubt in my mind that she's connected to the royal family. There's no doubt in my mind that the cult does this. And there's no doubt in my mind that there is a pallor, how would I put this, a haze over the whole world right now, largely as a result of our society, Western society, and the commingling of science and the occult, which I don't know if it's ever been done to this degree before on this planet, where the commingling of science and the occult has ever been done. Now, this evisceration of our connection to reality, a base reality, I'm not talking about a high spiritual reality, or even a low spiritual reality like the astral. I mean, our fundamental connection and understanding of reality is deliberately flawed. Everything that we are told is fundamentally wrong. The mathematical foundations of what we have been taught are wrong. The foundations of what we call medicine are wrong. The foundations of our philosophy are wrong. We're trying to perceive reality under a great handicap. And it's that handicap that produces all of these deficits. And these deficits accumulate. And if you can't see through them or ignore them or unshackle them yourself from them, then you're going to suffer from any one of the rising ailments in the West, for which, very conveniently, the pharmaceutical industry is waiting to treat you and make tens of thousands of dollars a year off of you, either through the public purse, through a socialized medical system, or through the depletion of your resources for something that you don't really need. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about the world to come. And there is a world to come. I don't think this is the end of humanity. I have friends who think it is, but I don't. I think we're going to be rolled back significantly, population-wise, in every way. We're going to be significantly rolled back. It's interesting that in the coding world, they use that term as well. It's where you get into developing an application, and this could be 6 months or a year into a complex application, with anywhere from 8 to 12 to 20 senior engineers working on this large and complicated project, multi-million-dollar project, a very complex system. And this would not be a system in the public domain. This would not be something that, you would buy online and download like Microsoft Office. Would not be like that. It would be a large system built for a bank or a chain of banks, a medical system, things like this. And sometimes when they're coding, they get to a point and they realize they made a foundational error. And when you make a foundational error, or let's say a misjudgment, okay, because you're coding something that's never been coded before. So there's no roadmap. The entire process is essentially experimental. You have a lot of thought about it. You have a lot of discussion about it. One example that comes to mind is Y2K. How the way they set up the clocks on computers, and they didn't account for the turn of the millennium, the year 2000, and how that required significant retroactive coding. It literally split the software world into two streams. People who were working on new development, new applications, new technology, and people who were used to repair the errors that began in the 80s when we started making computers. So that's an example of a significant foundational error. But they happen all the time when you're coding. Now, when you hit one of these errors, the development team will go into meetings and they'll brainstorm. Is there any way we can fix this without too much loss? And the loss is the coding they've been doing for the 6, 8, or 12 months. 12, 20 people working full time. If each one of them is making $150,000 or $200,000 a year, as these senior coders do these days, a year of coding for 20 coders, you're looking at a loss of, millions of dollars, and the time. And if you borrowed the money from a venture capitalist, because generally when you're in this coding stage, you don't have shareholders, then you're going to have some pretty testy conversations with your VC, your venture capitalist. Okay? But these things happen, and what they call them are rollbacks. So they say, oh, okay, well, we made a foundational error. We have to roll back. We have to go back 6, 8 months in our coding. We have to go to where we made the error, and everything from that point forward needs to be rewritten. Very laborious, and then you have the added burden, the emotional and mental burden of working in a time deficit. It's like writing half a novel, saying it's complete shit, throwing it in the fireplace, and starting over. Usually errors in a manuscript are not that grievous. Fiction and things like this. Book writing is not as perilous as coding. Coding is a very exact or semi-exact engineering procedure. I say semi-exact because coding languages like C#, C++, Java, Python, they're very flexible, and they're midway between a spoken language and a mathematical construct. It's a very interesting thing about code is that it fuses mathematics, algorithms, and language. Okay? And being dedicated to language all my life, I always found code very interesting, even though I don't code. I can script. I can do shell scripts on Linux, You know, they're very clumsy and laborious with a lot of repetition. They're not sophisticated, but you know, I taught myself to script. I can script on Windows as well. I can do a bash script on Windows. I can set up a process to compile things once I'm finished writing them. I write them in a language on a computer. It could be the Darwin Information Type Architecture. It could be restructured text. It could be Markdown or something like this. And they're basically just text files. And then there's a process that comes afterwards that stylizes it all into a book or into a website that can be searched. So I taught myself to do that, like how to script all that out and do that kind of stuff. It's called DevOps or DocOps. It's where you set up a writing environment for a team of writers, and all they have to do is write. They don't have to worry about the finished product. Everything is sort of automatically done through the programming that you do or the scripting that you do. The title page is added, the copyright is added, the table of contents is added, the pages are the perfect size, the margins are the perfect size. So all typesetting is done on computers now. And that started in the early 90s. About 95, everything went to computers. But before that, newspapers and magazines were manually laid out with a special kind of a ruler called a piker ruler. And then to get the pictures the correct size based on the available space and the advertising and all of this, you used what was called a ratio wheel. It was very, I mean, compared to what we have now, it was extremely primitive. But I'm talking about a rollback. Okay? So it's also interesting to note that everything that comes into our reality has spiritual value for anyone with the eyes to see it. There are a few principles of this creation that, once understood, allow you to yoke spiritual information from anything. Even coding on computers can teach you a lot about how the universe is constructed. And the reason for that is every time we're building something, every time we're constructing something, we're simultaneously etching out the rules of our cosmology, the universal laws that we live under, certain physical laws and laws that go into the subtler regions, the regions above physicality. The universal law permeates all of the regions. Even the gods are subject to them if they're living in another dimension or 2 or 3 dimensions above us, what some people might call a heaven. They are still subject to these rules which come from above. The rules are sort of set by the Creator, or they're an affectation of the Creator. Whether the Creator consciously sets them or not is another question altogether. And the Creator is a very mysterious thing. It's very difficult to understand. It's like a fox that you never see, and you just know it was there because you wake up in the morning and there's footprints in the snow. And you say, okay, well, the fox was here. There's the evidence. But you never see the fox. Okay? That's a metaphor for the Creator as well. The gods you can interact with, as I already explained in the God and Gods podcast. So a rollback is where you made a foundational mistake and you have to roll back. Okay? So if that happens in coding, it happens in life. If that happens in an engineering process that is largely theoretical, and I say theoretical because although computer programs produce things, there is no physical resource involved in them other than the coding language, the compiler, and the distribution. The distribution can be a localized server that projects the application or the service to you. The Google search engine would be an example of this. The physical resources would be the servers required and the bandwidth, the network bandwidth required to push all of this to the billions of users that are using it on a daily basis. So it requires resources, but the resources aren't really part of the design and the construction They're only part of the distribution. Think of like a Coca-Cola factory that bottles and cans it, and then once the formula for the Coca-Cola is done, once the recipe is achieved, once the equipment is finished to produce the soda pop, the beverage, the food engineers are finished. The rest is logistics and distribution. Trucks come in, you load it up with forklifts, and the trucks go out. It's the same thing in coding. Okay? But when you look at the two principles in both examples, you've got this AI just freaks me out. You've got production and distribution. Okay? And it's the same thing with computers. So when they're coding, they sometimes hit foundational errors that are so grievous, they have to go back 6 months to where they made the error and recode everything from that point forward. Okay? So what do I mean when I say that you can learn anything you can learn something spiritual from anything, even engineering processes, because they too are subject to the universal laws. So the world to come will be a partial rollback. We're going to have to go back to the point where we made the errors, and we're going to have to rebuild from there. So in this case, it would either be where I begin around 1880 in The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, or go right back to the mid-1800s where Darwin comes out with the theory of evolution, which is flawed, and rebuild from there. Why do I say that? Because when you get a foundational theory that is wrong, and it's taught to children for 3 or 4 generations, you produce an entire society that is thinking erroneously. And at some point, that's going to catch up with you. And you might not even know what's happening to you. Okay? Now, sometimes these mistakes are made honestly, but if it's an honest mistake, somebody will catch it very early on. Now, I don't have the time, nor do I have the inclination to do a 1-month reading and research project to decide whether the theory of evolution was easily accepted in its day, or whether it was forced on people the way, let's say, transgenderism is being forced on people now. But I suspect that evolution was sort of snuck in, and there were some very aware, spiritually aware, and very intelligent people who said, no, this is wrong. And they were just sort of steamrolled. And once it gets past them, the critics of the generation, and a short time after, 15 or 20 years, you're going to get most people accepting the theory. And it's going to be taught. And then the higher education, where you get into even the new work, like postdoctoral theses, PhDs, and things like this, it's all built upon something that's wrong. Okay? So that's one example, evolutionary biology. One example. What I'm saying to you tonight is we've got almost everything wrong, except maybe how to mix cement, how to stagger bricks to build a wall. We got that right. The Romans got that right. The Greeks got that right. The Persians got that right. The Turks, the Ottomans got that right. We know how to stagger bricks. And staggering bricks is where the length of a brick, the one on top of it, meets in the center of the brick under it, and that adds strength to the wall. If you put them all one on top of the other and just grouted between the rows, you could push that wall over with just touching it like a feather. But the mathematics of staggering the bricks is what gives the wall its strength. You learn that in earthbag building as well. These walls are all, the earth bags are all staggered. So we're on the cusp of a major rollback, and the rollback will be the exorcism, the expunging of the satanic influence that took us to this erroneous destination, this erroneous crossroads we're at now. Okay? I don't think it's end times. There may be a calamity with fire, as there was a calamity with water in the past, but that was only a rollback. We know that many people survived it. We know from, well, we don't know, but let's say we can accept as true that whoever this joker Noah was and his sons, they survived it. But they say they're the only ones who survived it. The Epic of Gilgamesh says otherwise. Okay? So we know people survive the flood. Okay? And there will be people who survive the fire, if the fire is coming, whether it's representative of a nuclear war or profound solar activity. Okay? If it's valid at all. I don't ask these questions. I don't, I'm okay with everything. And what I mean by that is, for me, death is a reward. It's not something to fear. It's a reward. I don't seek it like some crazy Viking looking for outrageous battles to test my bravery. I don't tempt fate. I don't look for death. But I'm not afraid of it, and I know it's the reward. Being in the body, living is the hard part. Death is the reward. Okay? It's always a blessing to pass from this earth. Please do not confuse what I'm saying with the endorsement of euthanasia. You came here with a plan and a blueprint, and you have to live it out. You have to grow as much as you can spiritually. You have to finish the tasks that were given to you. But when they're done and you're released from the body, the burden of the body, the slowness of the body, the being cut off from the cosmology, unless you get into deep meditation or something similar, you're cut off from the cosmology. You're cut off from the divine. Okay? It's there. But if you're unconscious of it, it doesn't matter very much whether it's there or not. You need the point is, you need to become conscious of it. So I don't, when is the world going to catch fire? I don't know. I don't care, and maybe it won't even happen. And at this point, I certainly wouldn't listen to the prophecies of Jews or Catholics or Protestants. I just wouldn't. Okay? But there's little doubt in my mind that a rollback is coming. Now, it's funny when you find yourself in a synergistic moment where the things you're talking about, suddenly someone more important than you says basically the same thing. And it happened, and I happened to catch it. So I'm going to play that for you now.
Is there an Aghori path? Definitely there is. Still a very active spiritual process. A recently dead body has certain possibilities. So certain systems use that. If you really want to see raising the dead and that kind of stuff, these are the people. Aghori means… Ghora means terrible. Aghori means that which is beyond terrible. So, is there an Aghori path? Definitely there is. Still a very active spiritual process. People use various substances to do many different things. A recently dead body has certain possibilities. So certain systems…
What they are doing is, there is body that is dead. There, if you go there to Manikarta, Aghoris will… everybody who'll… how old is this person, how did he die? That's why some of them who don't want that to be known, they're covering with plastic sheets, where people cannot see. How old is the person? They won't say, how old was the person? but the agoris want to know. If it's a young person, somebody who was vibrant life and for some reason he died, they want that kind. When that happens, they want to do work there. They want to make use of the energy that's released. Once the body begins to burn, this prana has to exit immediately. When that exits, they want to make use of that life energy to do something with themselves. If you do not know the science of that, you cannot just think it's all bizarre. Yes, it's an extreme way of doing things. It is not for everybody.
Why should somebody choose such a way? Because they don't see life as good and bad. They just see life as a possibility towards the ultimate. They don't care how. They don't care how they get there. Agora has never been socially acceptable kind of path because the things that they do are totally beyond anything that you would imagine. So, they do variety of things. These are the kind of people… if you really want to see raising the dead and that kind of stuff, these are the people. It is a very, I would say, crude technology. If you want to look at all systems of spirituality as a technology, it's a very crude technology, but still a technology. It works, but very crude. See now, you want to find water. You can dig a well with your bare hands, or you can use a crowbar and a shovel and dig. Or you can use some other kind of more sophisticated augers or whatever and dig. Or you can use a drilling machine and dig. Today you can actually do it in laser, it's expensive so nobody does it, otherwise with laser you could just dig a well. Same well, same water, but the way you do it is different. So if you do it with your bare hands, by the time you drink water, you will neither have nails nor skin left upon your hands, but you don't care because you're that thirsty. You're that thirsty. And it's also going to be a very long process, but still you don't care, you don't want to look anywhere except where the water is. You just want to go. If you are in that kind of thing, yes. But the problem with that kind of thing is your hands may wear out before you reach water. People have reached, not that they have not. With bare hands, people have dug wells and found water. But if you don't have strong enough hands, they may just wear out to the bone before you get to the water. And after your skin peels off, you may not have the strength to dig anymore. So those are kind of paths. If 1,000 people seriously take it on, one may make it, others will get lost. So these paths are generally taken more than spiritual dimension to acquire occult powers, that's why they go on that path. As a spiritual process, also it is a possibility. But most people may not get there because most people do not have that kind of perseverance, nor do they have that kind of courage, nor are they capable of handling disgust, because you have to do the most disgusting things in the Agori path. But they are done by people who want to acquire certain powers to dominate life, to dominate other human beings. In that context, yes, it has been an active and effective path. It has also been an active and effective spiritual process for some people, but that's very rare few. not for others. Others will just break and paths like that. They'll just break up because it demands a different kind.
They want to evolve to a place where what you hold as something that you abhor, they are trying to befriend that, because the moment you like something and moment you dislike something, you have divided the existence. And once you divided the existence, you cannot embrace it. So, they're going with whatever you would not be able to stand. What is most abhorrent for you, that is what they befriend, because they want to take away what they like and what they do not like. Everything is same to them. This is a way of embracing the universe.
So, that's the Aghori left-hand path in India. It's very interesting, the things that Sadhguru said, is it not? They hang around graveyards or the places where bodies are deposited in India. In India, people are burned. They just don't have the space to bury all the people. And it's the custom in the Hindu religion to burn people. So they are burned. And when you want a body burned, you take it to the cremation site. And the body may be there a while before it gets into the queue. And the Aghoris are there like bears at the dump in cottage country north of Toronto. And they're looking for fresh bodies and they're looking for young bodies. Because, as Sadhguru said, those bodies still have a little of the vital life force left in them, even though the consciousness has departed and moved on. Now I want you to go back to what Kat said. I think I will disagree with her that they capture the soul. I don't know for certain, nor am I sure I even want to know. It's very healthy not to want to know some things. That also goes against what we're taught in Western society. All knowledge is worth pursuit, no matter what the cost, no matter what the moral transgression. Remember my example of Da Vinci. Da Vinci was an occultist. Anybody who's dealing with freshly buried bodies, bodies that have been dead less than 72 hours, we could say is an occultist. We know that he was using the bodies for dissection, but we don't know what else he was into with those bodies. What I do agree with Kat about, and what I've known before she said it, is that very often mass slaughter, or in the Western tradition, wars will be used as magical rituals to harvest a lot of this prana energy, what the Chinese called qi, which is not a physical energy, but it's not a purely spiritual energy either. I would call it a psychic energy, because that's the only word I can think of, splitting the difference between material and spiritual. And the psychic regions are the dual worlds between the material and the spiritual. And we go to the psychic regions in between lives. We don't go to the spiritual regions. Once you get to the spiritual regions, as I said, all aspects of karma creation and attachment to the world are stripped from you. There's no need to come back here. I think there's only so much that Sadhguru is going to say. But in that video, he said quite a bit. But you need the ears to hear what he's saying. He is basically telling you what I have been telling you through this entire lecture series on The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me, and through the book itself. I call them the cult. You could just as easily call them Western Aghoris. Just as easily. What did Sadhguru say? These occult powers are very often used to gain power to control others. What did Kat say? They can take the energy from a sacrifice and direct it at you, and you will have thoughts in your head that are not your own. Not possession, something different. You see, we don't know these things in the West. We just don't know them. We do. They're practiced. It's the basis of the enforcement system that governs us. But we as a general population don't know about them. We're not given the knowledge to counter the magic that's being used against us, the occult power that's being applied against us. Now, I can't tell you why the Creator has allowed these people to do this over many generations and bring us to this point in the West. But it has happened. And because it has happened, I am going to assume that the Creator is okay with it. Many of the gods may not be okay with it. This is why the gods war, and the gods are used in these occult wars on the astral, manifesting on the physical as well. But the Creator, He doesn't do rollbacks. He may do audits. That is certainly what was suggested in The Galactic Historian, the book I authored for the gentleman. But generally the Creator won't do rollbacks because it violates His fundamental rule of non-interference and free will. Everything that you heard from Kat, she understands from direct experience. She's not studying with the Aghoris. She's not doing sadhana, spiritual work in the Vedic tradition under a series of gurus and teachers. Nobody told her these things and she's repeating them for me in an interview. She's telling you what she's seen with her own eyes, what she has experienced. The left-hand path is the main path in the West now, in terms of practiced religion. Christianity, Judaism, the increasing number of Muslims. These religions these days, except for inner circles within the religions, are mainly cultural. They're not practiced. I can't tell you the last time I bumped into a Catholic who fasts on Friday. Yet if you read the Catholic Catechism and the rules of being Catholic, you're supposed to fast on Friday. If you have a dietary condition that prevents you from doing it for your health, then at the very least you're not supposed to eat meat. I can't tell you the last time I bumped into a Catholic who follows that rule. Most of the Jews I know now are cultural Jews. They go to synagogue, or not even synagogue, they usually rent like a wedding space or a big convention hall for bar mitzvahs. The religious component may be a little bit of ham-fisted reading of Hebrew aloud. but there's not much going on there that's really religious. The Protestant religion has morphed into a prosperity doctrine that has delivered us the malignant capitalism and the derivatives market that we now live within. In India, they practice their religions. The Aghori have been around for centuries, millennia. The left-hand path. The cultivation of occult powers. Now, India has the required classes of spiritual figures in schools to keep them in check. So as I said 1 or 2 podcasts back, if somebody wants to practice Satanism in the West, I don't have the moral authority to tell them they can't do that. I suggested that they go 100 kilometers away from everybody into the woods and only sacrifice the children they produce by couples in the sect, in the cult, in the coven, and keep it separate from society proper. In the West, our spiritual consciousness has dilapidated to such a point that we don't even know that we're living in this satanic left-hand Aghori system. Sadhguru knows. He's hinting at it in that video, but he's not going to come right out and say it, because he's not American. It's not his place. He's not French. He's not British. He's not part of the West. He's giving us our free will, but at the same time letting us know and giving us a context and a container within which to put the understanding if you can hear what he's saying. And he said quite clearly, the Aghori path and the accumulation of occult powers has developed quite successfully in the control of populations. So the energy harvesting and the utility of the energy in the sacrifices is 2 or 3-fold. You've got the energy of the dead body, the prani, that Sadhguru referred to. You've got the blood, which is like dog food for whatever is serving you in the lower astral, whatever entities are addicted to your sacrifices. The prani can be taken in by the black magician or the Aghori for an energy assimilation, for a very, very almost chemical experience like ibogaine or ayahuasca or mescaline or mushrooms, but more powerful than that. So you've got the energy of the sacrifice, which can be used by the occultists, the energy in the body after death. The fear is collected as an energy in the death ritual, which is preceded by torture and fear. The blood energy is harvested. But beyond even that, that's one aspect of the culture that rules us. It's almost, when you look at it, as though they took the darkest stuff on the planet and amalgamated it all into one system. They worship power. And as power gets into spiritual practice, it gets into the occult, because power is not permissible. The gathering of power is not permissible in spiritual study. You're not allowed to gather power. It's antithetical to spiritual development. Spiritual development is the complete divestment of an interest in power, self, ego, personality. It's stripping all of these things down, getting rid of them, so that you can be a pure receptor of the divine energy. The left-hand paths, they go exactly the other way. They can't really break into true light. I would describe them largely as chemical paths, but occult chemistry, which informs our pharmacy business. The two are connected. When you look at the figures, look at what they just did to us. It was a giant ritual. Okay? So imagine these people that Sadhguru is describing, agoris. Imagine them clean shaven. Imagine them in $5,000 suits, $1,000 shoes, $200 ties, $1 million watches on their wrists, and imagine them in boardrooms. And imagine them gathering all kinds of energy from the society they govern through the other magical system, which is a variation of voodoo, which is the straw man, the legal person, the birth certificate, which is magic. It's energy harvesting magic. And imagine how much power they have. It's staggering to contemplate. Staggering to contemplate. So it's fascinating to contemplate all these things. And now is the time to say these things out aloud. It wasn't as easy to do in the past, and I'm not sure there was enough information out there, enough synergy between people for the distillation of everything into a cohesive thesis like The Devil in Us, like these podcasts. Why say something nobody's going to understand? Did Bill Cooper know? Did Jordan Maxwell know? I think no. I think they knew what they knew, and they presented their material. But really, when you go through it, I mean, you can listen to 100 hours of Jordan Maxwell or Bill Cooper and not really understand what's going on. You're just left with a kind of a dread, a kind of a doom. Now, there may have been a prohibition on saying these things at the time that they existed and that they had voice. Or they may simply have not known. But I can't see, looking at their basic personalities and the fearlessness of both of them, that they would not say it aloud simply and clearly if they knew. So I'm going to assume they didn't know. It takes a lot of information distilled. You know, if you're Canadian and you went through the school system, you may remember the field trip to the sugar shack, we used to call them. We would take the trips in the spring. There would still be snow on the ground. And you would go to a place where they made maple syrup. And you would see the spike, the tube put into the maple tree. You would see the bucket hanging off of the maple tree. And you would see the sap dripping in. And the person doing the tour would tell the kids how long it would take to fill up a bucket. And there were conditions for it, the thickness of a tree, various things. Then you take the sap over to a boiling process. And it's reduced about 20 to 1 to get to the thick brown syrup we call maple syrup. And that's completely distilled from the sap of a maple tree. It's one of the healthiest things you can eat, by the way, even though it's a glucose. It's just loaded with minerals. But it's the same thing with this realization we're coming up upon now. that all this information, all of these people who contributed to it, had to do their part so that it could be distilled into the crystalline realization, which is we're run by an occult society. And they've appropriated the darkest magics in the world from different parts of the world, as Kat said. They do blood rituals. They do sacrifice human beings. They do have slaves. They do raise children from birth to never know love. And they present themselves to us in the form of Justin Trudeau, Emmanuel Macron, or completely possessed morons like Joe Biden. And yes, he's completely possessed. It's not dementia, folks. He's possessed. You're literally looking at a possessed human being every time you see that doddering sack of shit walk up to a podium. And he's probably voluntarily possessed. He's basically a golem now, remotely controlled by some other force. So in the Western Agori system, Ukraine is a ritual. It's an energy harvesting ritual. Gaza is an energy harvesting ritual, with the bonus of beachfront real estate to sell to rich European and American and Canadian Jews, which they're now buying at private auctions, by the way. And as an added bonus, you get the $1 trillion of gas and natural gas and oil 500 meters off the coast of Gaza. So it's what they call at the racetrack a trifecta. You get to harvest the magical energy of all of these horrible deaths, and those deaths are being equitized by the rabbis. I assure you. I could never prove it in a court of law. And perhaps I should say at this point, this is my opinion. And I am saying that. This is my opinion. But I'll give it to you reasoned, and I'll give it to you with all of the supporting evidence I have. But you're not going to get it until you see it. Only the Creator can open up your vision to see it. You have to be able to tolerate the negative energy to see it. You have to have a little immunity to its radiation. I was given it as a birthright by my upbringing. Most people would vomit doing one out of the 10 steps I had to do to make this journey. They would fall to their knees, retch, vomit, empty their stomach, and turn around and say, I can't do this. So the world to come will be a rollback. How far we have to roll back depends on when we stop the cult. How much damage they do. How many booby traps they leave behind when we finally get them out of power. These people are capable of anything. Anything. Killing 1 million people is nothing to these people at the top. And at the top, they're not people, not the way you and I are people. And all of these unsold people now, as Kat pointed out, all of these people without souls. We say, oh, they're animals. Oh, they're not animals. Through the trauma of their life, they've been unsold. They don't feel. There are so many people that I would call incidental Satanists now. As Kat said, you know, they're bringing over all of these Congolese refugees now because they're soulless. They're 2-3 generations into war, thrown into war as children, which is an occult, which would be an occult practice, the child soldiers. So by the time these kids are 13, 14, they're going through villages and killing people with guns and machetes and knives, raping, sodomizing, probably sodomizing corpses. People go crazy in a bloodlust. If you think I'm exaggerating, read my favorite novel, Blood Meridian, or The Evening Redness in the West by Cormac McCarthy. Takes place at the Texas-Mexico border in 1855. I'll say no more. It's literally the best book you will ever read, but it's very dark. Very dark. The world to come will be without this. But it will only be without this in a population of people who've gone through all of their fourth dimensional lessons and who can live at this higher level of existence while still being in a body. If you can't handle it, you're going to disintegrate. As a living perception, you're going to disintegrate. And a lot of people are disintegrating now. They don't really live. They just show up on a daily basis and do the same things over and over again. They don't really live. It doesn't help that everybody lives in a dead world now. A concrete jungle separated from nature, and the trees at your park don't qualify. The squirrels your dog chases at the dog park do not qualify as immersion in nature. They simply don't. We were never meant to live that way. It took me till I was in my mid-40s to figure it out. I'm 58 in July, and I've been living 10 years outside of the system now. Every cell in my body now is replaced. From the food I ate in Canada, the fluoridated water I drank, it takes 7 years to replace every cell in a human body. And so every cell of my body now is of this mountain, is of the Talamancas, is of the mountain streams and the fruits grown here, the vegetables grown here, the peppers grown here, the tomatoes grown here, the onions grown here, the eggs produced here. Some people say to me sometimes, I ran away. I ran away from the fight. What fight? How are you fighting? Where's the front line? Who's resupplying you? Who's pacifying the banks because you can't pay your bills while you're fighting? Who's keeping the lights on in your house while you're fighting? There's no fight. This is a perfectly executed, multidimensional, asymmetrical war. So occulted, most people don't even know they're in the middle of it right now. I ran away? There is no fight. The best fighters will be the people who do it from strategic locations, divorced from the contagion of the environment, from the hysteria and trauma to come. That's from where the war will be fought. And it's a war for possession of your thoughts and your perceptions as much as it's a war for land and resources. But it is a war. This was really the only way it was ever going to happen. America has been psychologically prepared for a confrontation of a physical nature since its inception, since its birth and revolution. Habitually reinforced with the entrainment of the cinema and television for at least 5 or 7 decades now. Truth, Justice, Standing Up, Gary Cooper, High Noon, Bruce Willis, Die Hard, Yippee-Ki-Yay. Everybody thinks they're ready for the fight, but they don't even know they're in the fight. Reminds me of the last words of John Edmonds that I got in a text message. He said, "I live in a place where the Spanish people are ready to do whatever it takes to survive, and the white people around me don't even have any idea of the level of danger they're in, nor would they believe you if you told them." They've already pacified you. And I know that to be a true fact because you're not fighting. You should hear some of the bullshit I hear from people, rationalizing why they are where they are. And it's just a bullshit rationalization. Some people, a lot of people I know, just want to go down with the ship, like a dutiful sailor. They have the money and the resources to get out or to get to someplace safe. They have $3 to $5 million in equity readily available, sell a house, and they sit in a dangerous place. And it's a passive suicide. And it's spiritually incorrect. You have to fight for your life. Always you have to fight for your life. That's it for today. The world to come. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.